So, sorry about the kind of jumpy video there. That car was so frustrating. The Fiat went back together kind of okay. The ball joints on the front I had the biggest issue with. Typically I never have a problem, but they're aluminum double wishbones and they have steel inserts, and just there's no room to get a good implement in there, like an air chisel. So I ended up using a mallet with the nut threaded on. However, you bend over the lip of the nut. So if you end up doing that, I would recommend just buying some new nuts ahead of time, just in case you destroy them like I did. So I ended up kind of goobering the threads on the left side one, and it took me a long time to borrow a powerful enough impact to really get it ramrodded on there. But either way, the eye-box springs are pretty good. Overall impression of those, they drop it just about an inch, which is what I was after. It's a little bit lower than a stock Abarth now. Ride quality, I am pleasantly surprised to say, is pretty much exactly the same. A little bit better rebound actually with the stiffer spring on that stock shock, so I wouldn't worry too much about putting lowering springs on a stock Classica or Lusso strut assembly. The LSD works great. It makes the car much less twitchy on oversteer, which is pretty nice. The automatic ratio definitely keeps the car on boost a lot better through first and second gear, so it's noticeably faster off the line now. My roommate just bought a 124 Abarth 6-speed, and he was not able to keep up with me off the lights at all. So interesting point there. The gear shift, or not the shift indicator, but the gear position indicator on the gauge cluster, I was worried that that wouldn't work by changing the differential ratio, because it uses mathematics to figure out when the clutch is engaged what gear it's in, just based on the engine RPM. Happy to report that that works just fine. Overall, really good mod. I would actually recommend, now that I know it works, to get an LSD from an auto Abarth for your 6-speed, because it's a little bit faster. I haven't really noticed any fuel economy difference. I get horrible fuel economy in that car either way. So anyway, that's all done. I do still have a GFB diverter to put on there. I'm going to skip the front sway bar because I looked into the installation on that, and it's ridiculous, and it's roughly the same size. I think it's 1 millimeter bigger. It just has adjustable outer ends. So the car is pretty neutral as it is. It's not oversteer prone with the rear bar, so I'm gonna leave it. Now, on to today. You'll see that I am in Mr. Wags, a car that I almost never ever drive. The reason behind that is I figure may as well have a differential week. So, and I'm gonna look into, maybe I have to do a rear right wheel bearing on this. I'm getting really bad sensor resolution on the wheel speed sensor on the rear right on this car. It'll occasionally just dump out everything, and it's progressively gotten worse. I've tried a few different sensors. But either way, I have an automatic 328 diff that I'm going to put in this, make it a little bit punchier. I did that in my roommate's car accidentally when I had to replace his entire rear subframe, and we both really liked the performance level. So I don't care really about fuel economy on this vehicle, so I figure why not? Plus, I think this diff leaks a little bit, so I think this will be a good, fun little swap out. I'm pretty sure in the E90 you can do the diff also without dropping pretty much anything out of the car, so fingers crossed. Yeah, I'm just headed down to the garage right now to get that done, and I'll take some video for you guys. But again, sorry about the kind of messy video with the Fiat. I know that's going to end up being mostly voiceover anyway, but when I've got friends down in the garage, I don't always remember to take video, so it is what it is. But hope you guys are all holding up well, and stay tuned for the rest of this job. Okay, here we are under Mr. Wags. I haven't had most of this apart in a long time, and I definitely drove this through a couple winters, and the person before me drove it through East Coast winters. So all things considered, it's really not that rusty, but oof. Also, yeah, I forgot how bad the weld is on this exhaust. It's basically dumping most of the exhaust right into the car. I'm gonna get some PB on these bolts right here, and then I'm gonna pop the 8 out of here, just bend the heat shield away, pull the fasteners off of the diff, and same thing with the axles on both sides. Shouldn't be too bad, actually. Then we've got two 18 mils on the front, and we've got a single 21 back there. The 21's probably gonna be the toughest, just because the wagons have these big structural braces. So that'll be a wrench, but won't be too bad. And I've got the auto diff right here out of a nice clean Southern car, low miles. Oddly enough, the diff in Mr. Wags isn't leaking at all, which is pretty rare for one of these. But yeah, just a little bit too tall for my liking. So going to a shorter ratio, since we experimented with that on Kurt, and apparently it's really good. A little bit rusty, but the drive shaft's still in excellent shape. No play, and it still actually has a little bit of stiffness to it. Next up, half shafts, and then I'll get going on those support bolts. Again, there's 21 up in there, and 18's here. Oh, well, old diff's out. New one's going in. We were a 3.23 before. Now we'll be a 3.73. So Kurt went from 323 to 391. This won't be quite as spicy, but filled it with GL5 and time to hammer it in.
Count me out. What?
Oh. The diff is in. I think it's just the rear structural brace. And she's done. Since it's a wagon and as a trailer hitch, I've got to leave those shims in there, but it looks pretty good. Pretty good. Very fine. So now moving on to the 124. The reason I have to do a voiceover on this is because apparently I had Spotify going in the background and I got a copyright note. So coming back at this again, I am doing a diff swap. So my car is a Lusso, which is the top trim level. However, it does not come with a limited slip diff like the Abarth does. So I was actually able to find an LSD out of an Abarth. Even one out of an ND Miata will work. And it turns out the diff I bought is out of an automatic, which is actually kind of cool. I think the diff ratio that's in this car right now is 345 or something like that, and the diff I bought is a 360 something. So it is a little bit quicker off the line now, but everything still works in the car, which is pretty cool. So anyway, on the diff swap, in order to get this done, you do have to pull basically the rear brake calipers, you have to pull the hubs off on both sides, and you have to drop the subframe about an inch, because in their infinite wisdom, when they designed this thing, they didn't give it quite enough room to tilt the diff out from the back. The hardware was just showing you there on that torque tube. You have to pull that off on the transmission and the diff. The entire, it's not even a torque tube, but you know what I mean, that stamped piece that connects the transmission and the diff, that has to come off. So you see it on the ground right there. It's not a hard piece to remove. All the components are very light. You can see I was doing some trial and error there, but the hubs do have to come off entirely. So may as well just pull those. The half shafts come out with a pry bar. There's just a little spring clip in there. If your car is fresh, which it is, it's going to take some pushing. So shameless plug, I guess. My buddy John was giving me moral support in this job, and he's quite a Supreme fan. So anyway, you can see the subframe is dropped a little bit. It doesn't need to come out of the car, but it's a tight fit. So once the diff is drained, you can tilt it. Honestly, if you're looking at the back of it, you can do clockwise about 90 degrees and it'll pull right out. So there you can see my Lusso diff and the Abarth diff. I paid, I think, about $600 for the Abarth diff, which is a really great deal. But it slapped right in, no problem. I'm actually doing suspension here now, so the rear is there to get at the top mounts. You just have to pull out a few two-piece push clips in the trunk, and you can get at the, I think they were 13 or 14, I think they're actually 14 millimeter top nuts. And the entire assembly will just drop right out when you've got the knuckles off. The front's a little different. You've got double wishbone, and these are aluminum knuckles, but they have a steel insert, so it's actually really, really tough to get these to separate. And I ended up mushrooming one of the nuts, which made my left side lower ball joint pretty tricky to work with. So if you're doing a lowering spring set, just be a little bit careful. So that's what the car looks like with no rear knuckles and no suspension in it at all. The fronts, you're going to want a friend to help too. Getting the uprights out without hitting the fender requires pulling down quite a bit on the upper wishbone. So, I've got a spring compressor here. I actually used to have the genuine Schwaben one, but it's a piece of crap. So this one is the eBay one, and it works. Oh shoot, I'm back. It works way better than the Schwaben one did. It seems like it's better quality. It doesn't rely quite as much on split pins, but yeah, it works great for any McPherson type spring. Just using my Ugga Dugga to get the top mount off, and I actually ended up going with a set of iBox springs. That's just what I could get through my connection without spending a ton of money. So pretty straightforward process. All the hardware, the factory mounts and things worked just fine. And the car actually still rides pretty well too with the factory Lusso shocks. The Abarth had Bilsteins from the factory, but even the stock Classica Lusso ones seemed just fine with the lowering springs. Well, what a beautiful day to be, quarantined still. Kurt is back down. I think this is the last maintenance item the car actually needs right now. But it's getting a pan gasket. I know, sound like a broken record these days. I think I've got a bolt set in here. Urgh. Yes, very good. Whew. E90s are a little bit easier, especially rear-wheel drive ones, than that F10. So I guess let's get cracking. Kind of the same process. I'm actually going to start... Where did I put that thing? There it is. E39 tow hook. We're going to need this to lift the engine, because of course the E90 tow hook also doesn't fit. But this sure is handy dandy. Alright, so even a couple threads of engagement, pretty good. I'll get the bar on here and get the tension taken off, and we'll go bottom side. All done. So I'm going to drain her out and then pull the pretty mutilated underpanels off. However, it's my roommate's car, and I just texted him asking if he wanted oil analysis or not, so I'm not going to drain it until I hear back on that, but she greasy. Pan gasket has definitely failed on this car. Much worse than the F10. Yeah, it's going to need this. It's had other leaks too that have kind of compounded to make this. I've fixed the other ones, but this one is still pretty bad. Those exhaust nuts aren't looking too good either. But those don't have to come off. Well, in the classic thick of it, I totally forget to take video because I start just grenading on stuff. Took off the plastics, start with the back one, work your way forward. Then I took off the little 10 mil that holds this to the rack. You probably don't actually need to pull that off. 4 13s that hold the sway bar on, drop that down. Then there are 2 Torx T30s that hold this plastic hose onto the subframe. Actually, there's maybe a third one up here. There is a third one, which I still have to remove. Then there's this brace right here. Those are 16s. I think there's 5 of those, maybe 6. Then there are 6 18s around the perimeter for the actual subframe. And each one of the motor mount ends has an E10, maybe an E12. Steering shaft, I don't think you actually have to mess with on this. I think there is enough clearance. Yeah, if you need a water pump, now is definitely the time to do it because the access is excellent. But yeah, next up, disconnected the pan level sensor and the ground, 10, and just a pressure clip. And now I'm just going to go around and take all these bolts off the oil pan. I'm going to leave one on each side, just lightly threaded in, take those out at the end. I don't want to make a huge mess, but she was oily. So all the pan perimeter bolts are out. On a rear-wheel drive manual with a steel pan, it's actually not too bad. The next thing I'm going to do is just pull this little E10, this little E10, and this little E10. Purpose behind that is it will allow the pan to drop straight out instead of hooking up on it. So you can do it without it, but before I take my pry bar, jam it in there and get her out, figure, may as well, do it right. Very easy. And although this car just gets the shit kicked out of it mercilessly, looks really good. And honestly, that's probably why it looks really good. Cars tend to like being driven hard as long as the oil is warm. So, gonna wipe everything down, let it just kind of drip dry for a little bit here. I kick these bolts out of the way so I don't have to clean them off too. Then stay out of the gush stream of oil. Because of course, this car was driven pretty recently, so it's gonna lick a little bit. Yeah, we'll get the new pan gasket up in there once it's drip dried a little bit more, and then I'm just gonna kind of gently hang it in the back with 2 finger tighted old bolts. Then we'll get the pan slapped in there after I clean it. And yeah, that trick keeps the pan gasket in place and keeps it free from damage while you slide the pan in, because it is a tight fit underneath the oil pump in the front there on this front hump. So the old gasket is completely shot. I mean, just swollen to all hell. Not too surprising given how many oil leaks were on this thing up top, significantly shortening the life of the gasket. Yeah, pretty gross. So, clean it up, throw it back together. Name of the game. Alrighty. All brand spanking new. Nice. And the destroyed shield is back on. Time to fill it with oil, put a new filter on it, and hope for the best. Gross.